But here we are. Last time, and as you can see, we have crossed over many lectures, and it's been over a month since we started. And here we are. Okay, so a little bit about setups. My setup here. I need to click 2 windows. Well, let's just go into the last exercise we made you do, and I've been going over the answers. Not all of them, to be honest with you. There's so much of it, but the point was that actually then going most of them and picking up, and I picked 3 themes from last week's exercise. So the exercise was actually to facilitate. And we gave you the task of designing a workshop, and then the other person helps that other person design it. So the other person was facilitating, and then you switch. And going through the answers, kind of 3 themes came up that I'm going to present to you that you found beneficial, or many of you actually mentioned in the reflections. And they're kind of obvious, but I mean, they are, again, really good reminder for us that, hey, it is as simple as this. And if all of you, or let's put it, many of you really underline that this is important, then it's kind of like, yeah, we do it more often. So the first one was just the benefits of having another pair of eyes. So having somebody like the first quote over here, the facilitator does not know the context as well as you do, and therefore they see from a different perspective. And having it's just the basic of having somebody else looking at what you are doing. And they don't have to be the expert, because they need, they can ask questions, and you need to clarify. And once you clarify, you're like, yeah, actually, now that I clarified it, I understand this and this and this. And then, of course, pretty much another thing that somebody said, the last quote, is that we get so blinded by our own ideas. Kari, do you want to add?
Yes, I would like to add. I think very, very good points, very, very crucial points here. And one more to this. I think the facilitator also have a kind of neutral position. So and that enables he or she to ask different questions, because we normally have a lot of stake, and we are so involved and engaged that we are blinded in a way, but we have also different biases, and this neutral position enables the facilitator really to be helpful. So I think it's one part of all these.
And it is a role. It's like like theater or acting. It is a role. So you can be so explicit about it. You can say that, hey, I'm going to now be the facilitator, and that role implies that certain playing dumb or being neutral. But that actually brings us to the other topic that you brought up, which I think is an important question. Many of you were wondering about it. Actually, a lot of you were like stating and saying that the facilitator should not bring their own ideas. You were very hesitant about it. And I think, like the first quote here, definitely, that if you would bring your own opinion and experience, you would ruin the whole process. Of course, it's not that black and white. I think it's a good starting point that you start like, okay, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna be the neutral one here. I'm gonna be the facilitator. But I picked the last quote here, was that because the person wrote that once you kind of understand what the other person is doing, you can actually bring your own experience and your own opinions through the questions you ask. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I guess the point is that we want you to be a little bit sensitive about it, that when to bring your own opinions, when do you bring your own experience. But also being very kind of, if you have done similar workshops 50 times than the other person, it's like, why don't you bring your experience into it? It's kind of like, but this is, it depends a little bit on the situation, depends on the kind of the contract you have with the other person. Are you going to stay neutral? And what is the right moment to bring your own views and your own opinions? But definitely, it doesn't mean that you should not bring your own opinions.
Here again, it's a challenge for this so-called neutrality. Of course, neutrality is not so black and white either, but it's good to also recognize our own lenses, because we all have, as a facilitator, we have certain tendencies and certain favorable answers, favorable options, and so on. And I think this suggesting options is not maybe needed when we focus on how we construct and generate options. So we can also ask, but then we can give hints. And of course, this if we are very experienced, then I think it's a little bit unfair not to use that experience. And sometimes we can, of course, say that, okay, I had one case, would you like to hear about that? And then ask, what do you think about this? Not just giving an advice, but bringing your experience as a kind of resource to the discussion, but then letting the client really to decide what to take and why, and so challenge him or her to use that your experience in a meaningful way. And so that's maybe the point.
Yeah, I think that was really well put, to kind of bring it into the table as a resource. And I guess that's also, if you have a lot of experience, you can kind of bring other examples as a resource as well, saying that, hey, by the way, 2 years ago, I attended this kind of a workshop and they did it this way. And then you can bring that to the table again. And then the person's like, wow, okay, so somebody has done it like that. And that somebody can be you, the facilitator, or somebody else. Or if you're really sensitive, you kind of fake it and say that it was, I'm not asking for me, I'm asking for a friend, type of thing. But definitely, like I said, you should, if you have done it and you have your own views and your own experience, don't hide it. I don't think that's very productive. And then the third theme that seemed to be from your answers was, of course, that some of you thought that, hey, this is really easy. And some of you were like enjoying it and saying that, yeah, it was really easy to be a facilitator. Many of you actually said that it was easy to be facilitated as well. But some of you also pointed out that, well, it wasn't that easy. And it depends, of course. And some of you were, I think there was a quote I don't have here, was really nicely written, how the personalities of the people, of course, affect. And like in this course, we have talked about the power structures or hierarchies and all of these little things that sometimes it's easy to facilitate and sometimes it's more difficult. Sometimes it requires extra energy. Sometimes it just flows automatically. And
I guess it's always interaction in a way that it depends also the client, because some persons maybe are let's say it's easier to facilitate them. They are more, let's say, open and prone and curious and so on, and that invites us as facilitators to be a kind of good facilitators. And sometimes it's more challenging when there's more uncertainties and so on, more emotions involved, and maybe more, let's say, withdrawn persons or let's say this kind of hesitance. And then it can be a kind of more challenging situation to help the generation of ideas or the process.
And like if you look at the chat, I noticed that there was Mealy had a really good point that John also underlined. And what you write is that I think it also depends on the confidence of the person being facilitating and the difference on skill levels. If the person facilitating can be seen as an authority on the subject, they probably should be more careful on giving too precise ideas. Absolutely. It should be taken into account.
Yeah.
And especially often I've been, as a teacher and there's a student and then people think that I'm an authority. That of course is taken into account. And yes, sometimes I have done the thing that they are doing for years and years. But I mean, that's just, then you kind of, you play it out and then you understand that you kind of make these little things, it's a social interaction. You make these things saying that, it doesn't mean, and you understand the context. So for me as a teacher, often the point is that the other person, the student, needs to learn. And that's how I kind of, how should I say, moderate my opinions and giving the answers. Yeah. Which is a bit different context that if I was facilitating somebody who, actually is going to run a workshop for their professional scene. And then,
I think the basic rule in facilitation should be that of course the client should be, or we can assume that he or she is expert in the content, so in their own context and the content we are talking about, and we are expert in process and the method, and that's kind of thing helping in this helping process. But of course, that's not either so black and white.
But I think what you mentioned, Jari, also brings up this kind of metaphor of having a coach and, you know, coaching an athlete. That even if the coach knows that you should run 100 meters under 10 seconds, it doesn't really matter because it's the athlete who's supposed to do the running. So in this sense, also this kind of hierarchy that, you know, me or Jari would have the right answers is kind of like, yeah, that's nice, but at the end of the day, it is you who are supposed to run the workshop. Yeah. So it's not about having the right answers. It's about facilitating how does that person run 100 meters under 10 seconds, or how does that person actually, you know, run a really good workshop next week. So that kind of changes the whole perspective into it. It's not about right or wrong answers. It's all about coaching the other person to do a really good job. Yeah. Which kind of brings me to this slide. So, before we go here, just, you know, giving you a little bit of room. Anybody want to comment anything? Say out loud. Feel free to write in the chat. We're not in such a hurry. Sorry about that. Let's give you a few minutes there. Feel free to write in the chat anytime. Okay. I'll proceed. I was about to say that then it's really, as a facilitator, remember, this is you as a facilitator, this course is all about, which I'm going to come back. There's a slight difference. And when you take this, that you realize that now I'm a facilitator, now I'm a coach, now I'm a teacher, whatever kind of role you're taking. Well, that's actually the first question there, is that, okay, what is your role now? In this context, what is your role? And how do you communicate that to the other people? Then once you understand who are the other people, what's the context, what's your role, what kind of angle you choose? How are you going to approach this situation? And then after that, you kind of look, okay, what are the techniques I'm going to use? You open your toolbox and think about individual tools, but also kind of, you know, mental, you know, thinking models and the kind of interaction techniques you want to use. And then last but not least is that what's your style here? And I go back to Mieli's comment about the different skill levels as well, because even if you feel that you're very junior as a facilitator, then you kind of can take the style of saying that, hey, I'm so new to this job. Can you please explain to me how this works? Or you know, you can present your own ideas as, yeah, I don't know much about this, but you know, this kind of crossed my mind. What do you think? And you're actually facilitating the other person. You're kind of throwing them an ideas. Can you please explain it to me? Or, you know, like I said, I'm new to this job. How does this actually work here in this workplace? And you might be that's actually a style or technique. Which brings me to the next slide as well, maybe taking a little bit, again, emphasizing this, sometimes a very small difference between doing it and facilitating. But I hope you have kind of realized and learned is that there might be actually a really big difference. So there's a difference if your job is to plan a workshop, that's a different role than if you're supposed to facilitate the planning of a workshop. That was last week's exercise. Because the other person it's like my little metaphor about running the 100 meters. There's a huge difference if you're trying to help the other person run the 100 meters under 10 seconds, or if you're going to run the 100 meters under 10 seconds. But sometimes you might get these a little bit mixed, which goes into this, that are you an expert giving advice, coaching, or are you the neutral facilitator, what we just talked a few minutes back? And here's in text format what we pretty much talked about, the neutrality. And you should be able to understand that, okay, in this context, I think it would be better for me to remain a little bit more neutral. And then, you know, just like last week's exercise, are you going to focus on the workshop? How do you actually run the workshop? Or are you going to focus on the before and the after of it? You can kind of make this division as well. And of course, the slight difference of being a facilitator and being facilitated. They seem to be very close, and in a way they are very close, but now I hope you last week experienced that, yeah, there is actually a very clear line between them. And you probably even experienced that having maybe a different like eyeglasses or hat or different mentality that now I'm facilitating versus that now I'm being facilitated. Which actually is pretty much like the first line there, saying that there's actually a big difference between being the person responsible for the workshop or being the facilitator or the responsible person. Let's see, there's a comment as well, Antti writing down. Antti says, to me, facilitating is about holding space for the other and their process. That's very nicely put. Allowing them to kind of naturally come to the right conclusions. Yeah. Questions are not just gently guiding them, but still respecting their space, allowing them to be in control. Yeah. And at least between the lines here, Antti, I read from your comments is kind of like, it's their baby at the end of the day, like the midwife metaphor, that you're helping them, obviously, and you're in a way kind of gently bringing your experience into the game, but also kind of letting them have their baby, which is letting them take the responsibility, appreciating the fact that they're carrying the responsibility here. That's another way of saying that it's their baby. And then the kind of, to take it from here, the next step, as a facilitator, you might be, again, wondering more these kind of questions for you in your coming up with your role and your techniques and your angle. You might be asking yourself these questions, and maybe you already did last week. How to balance your expertise and theirs? We've been talking about this. What's your agenda and what's theirs? And this means that what are you trying to achieve in this facilitation? And how is it different from what the other people are trying to achieve? Why are they here? Your opinions, their opinions, again, a little bit about the neutrality. Your techniques and tools and theirs. And by this, I mean that when you open your toolbox, there might be all these tools, but you have to be, again, mindful that maybe the other people have different tools. And maybe they're more familiar with those tools. So even if you know that this tool is better and you're super comfortable with it, you might actually have to use the other people's tools because, hey, they are super comfortable with them as well. Kind of goes back last week when we talked about design for non-designers, is that, okay, if the non-designers are more familiar with this kind of tools, then let's use them to do design, to put it bluntly. And then many times, I guess, during this course, the question about personalities has popped up, which is obvious. Like we said many, many times, it's a social interaction between human beings, and personalities have a role. We are not robots yet. So therefore, the personalities are, and you should be aware of them, conscious, sensitive about them. And I think this quote was from previous year when somebody had written down that, kind of asking what does the other person need from the facilitator. So actually, having all of these questions I have on the list, but not pondering them in your own little corner, but then just going to the people and asking them, so what do you need? What do you expect from this facilitation? What would you like me to do? So we actually start negotiating each other's roles and goals. So why not be open about it? It shouldn't be a secret. Yeah, Jari.
Yeah, I would like to really emphasize this part, that we also always should negotiate and agree on the roles. That roles we can just try to play by ourselves, take a role, but it's always interaction, it's always relational. And I think it's a fair thing to negotiate and be open with that. And when we are having this, when we talk about the facilitation, I think it's the first thing to do, really to agree. And then of course the needs. Why are we having this? What's the purpose it's serving in this situation? So I think being clear with this, it's a starting point for successful facilitation and mutual understanding, and also revealing the expectations I think it's just very fair. And taking a spin-off from this to the discussion in chat concerning the coaching and facilitation, which was raised, that how they are similar or different. And I would say that there is, of course, overlap, but there is, as I was talking about this, that there is a certain family of methods. We are talking about mentoring, coaching, supervising, or even mediating, that they are kind of helping methods. And when we talk about the coaching, it's maybe starting to a little bit going towards giving advice even. And I would like to call then that we talk about the expert consulting. That if somebody is asking our expertise, then we give advice, and that's consulting more than coaching. But of course, there is always this kind of blurring lines. But as a coach, it's in organization and this kind of social setup, it's different from sports coaching, where the expertise of coach is one part. But in management and leadership, it's coaching is a little bit more that we are helping the other person figure out that the ownership of the issues is still on client side. Mm-hmm. And so respecting that and being aware of these boundaries, I think it's important. But whatever we do, we should agree on what we call it and what are the roles and what is the reason, purpose to do the process.
Yeah, I think it all, just like you said, why not be open about it? Let's put it in the forward. Let's start by negotiating that. What do you mean by mentor? Is it the same I mean by a mentor before we start mentoring?
Yeah.
Or coaching? What do you mean by coaching? Oh, okay.
And what we mean here together, what are kind of expectations and so on. And so it's much clearer.
Alexandra is asking, from our experience, what are the best ways to make sure that everybody in the workshop feels responsible for contributing and achieving the workshop's goals? Yeah, that can be sometimes tough, and I think we talked about that in one of the lectures about commitment. And I think I used the words that, the workshop is just fun little play, where that this is actually serious stuff, and that is the commitment. What are the good tricks about it? I think one of the things that if you workshop on real topics, on real problems that people are responsible, then it kind of automatically comes in. Yeah. The other one is just like, again, saying it out open and having a discussion that, okay, what happens next? Who's going to take these ideas further? Yeah. Then I had that little trick that I made actually people sign. We had a canvas and then people put answers there, and then I let them sign it with your own name, just to emphasize that, hey, you have actually now taken this seriously.
I would like to add something to this, Mario's points in chat about this coaching, that it's one-to-one and facilitation is for a larger group. But we could maybe make a difference from that point of view, that facilitation concerns quite often the single event, or of course it can be serious events concerning the transformation in organization. But coaching is more focused on certain, let's say, it can be building competencies or enabling people to work differently. But it can be also, I think it's very good to have a group which you coach. That coaching a group or team, management team, for example, I think it's very, very, let's say, can be very beneficial from that perspective.
I think there's some ice hockey games going on. I think the coaches there actually coach a group of people. Just to give you an example. But at the end of the day, what it says in the green over there, negotiate the roles and
yeah, indeed,
we get less mismatches. But now we're going to get soon to the first exercise, which we're going to have before the break. And it's all the simplicity. It is thinking a little bit about what did you get out of this course. But before that, I'm just going to, remind us what has happened in this course. But we're going to soon ask you for, a couple of minutes individually, just think about key takeaways for you personally, and then we're going to put you into groups, and then you share those key things among your peers. And just a reminder, the course objective was this. We would be really happy if we change the thinking about leadership, organizations, and facilitating that kind of change. And also, you probably got that this is actually, it's not a theoretical thing, that this is very practical. there's a lot of repetition going on. So it's not like, here is the answer and that's it. But no, you read it over and over and over and over again, just like any skill. And there's a lot of personality involved. And then also our objective was that, trying to leverage the crowd, that you are students and a diverse group of professionals as well. And kind of, gently forcing you to listen to other people and talk to strangers and do facilitation. Especially you students, when we kind of prohibited for you not to couple up with your friends or people but to face the strangers. And hopefully we provided you with materials and links and tools and thinking. And the lecture topics were these. We kind of had them in the beginning as well. Maybe importantly, the exercises, now that when you kind of look at them as a group, we started with the context onion that looked like that. Then we had the timeline, the temporal onion. Then we did the goal clarification, the dumb champagne exercise. Then the listening and reflection exercise that Jari gave. And then finally, everything kind of was this kind of mini final project that you actually did a proper facilitation, coaching or workshop. So, like I said, now take a moment. I'm going to give you at least 2 minutes of silence. And just go back personally in your own peace and quiet. Kind of, what do you think was? What was meaningful for you? And what are your key takeaways? I'll start my countdown that you be in peace for 2.5 minutes. Maybe that's a good compromise. Here we go. And that was 2.5 minutes. So now we put you into the breakout rooms. Kira and Lee, I hope you are ready. But here's for all of you. It's just on all simplicity. Share your experiences with the people there. What has been meaningful for you? And what are your key takeaways? And I'm sure listening to the others will facilitate that as well. Okay, and then when you come back just before the break, then write maybe a few bullet points of what kind of things people had or what you had in the group. Here we go.
Time to continue. So next 15 minutes, we will talk about meta skills and meta routines, and a little bit about that. What are meta skills and why are we talking about those? And another thing, what are meta routines and why they are important when we talk about the facilitation? And third thing, how can we learn and improve those skills and why do they matter? So meta skills, it's understandable, is something above or something more, let's say, one system level up. Skills that are helping us to use our core skills. We could define, and so they are kind of let's say keeping ourselves up or our activity up, and then of course, for example, learning can be said to be a meta skill in a way. And why do they matter? And why do they matter even more now? It's something that when we had our introductory lecture, Risto talked about a lot about uncertainty and discontinuities and disruptions, and so we are living in a world which is pretty much changing, and there is this fog in a way, and somehow it's more needs to adapt, more needs to make sense, more needs to learn and transform, take another view, and also take and question our let's say regular lenses to look at the world. So there is more need this kind of learning and adaptation in general. And somehow when we talk about meta skills, it's something that we all have. We have all reached a certain level of these skills through our life experience. So some more, some less. Some are, let's say, there's a lot of such skills which are quite intuitive or implicit, or we don't think about. It's very automated stuff in a way, and some of us are much more aware of those and let's say advanced in a way. But I would argue that it's beneficial to really to pay attention to deliberate learning of these skills, and when we talk about our university, let's say traditional academic learning and education, it's something that is just that we learn these things here in the side as a side effect in a way, and it has not been so much in the focus. Because the content and the substance stuff is the expertise in a way. That way is the focus. But fortunately, there is more and more attention paid to this lately. So this kind of interaction, collaboration. Okay, let's say interaction, maybe not, but learning, reflection, and self-management and such things. There are more and more such skills. Focused as well or raised as an important part. But I would argue that that this kind of generic or meta skills are more and more decisive in all professions and in all organizations now and in the future. So it's not, and when we talk about the leaders, facilitators, coaches, all those who are somehow this kind of relational professions or relational roles in organizations, this meta skills kind of thing, they become maybe more course as a part of the core skills. They are not nice add-on, they are kind of core things. But when we have to collaborate, we have to adapt to transformation and be kind of change agents in a larger or smaller context. Then this kind of meta skills are kind of important there. And there's one framework when we talk about let's say maybe what is really meta and what's kind of core or generic skill. I think those are kind of a little bit blurred boundaries here, but there's one framework I would like to show you to hopefully illustrate a little bit what kind of skills which are kind of core, and we can also talk about this framework as a leader's skill set in a way. So first thing is that skills that are somehow connected to ourselves as persons, and of course whatever self-help book, leadership book, or coaching book we take, this kind of first thing is kind of self-awareness, and we have been talking about quite a bit of this. So this is about lenses, so, and our values, our what kind of persons we are, and it's about our identities as well. So what's our mission in life, if you like to put it that way, or how to make a meaningful life, what we want, what's our personal aims, and why are we pursuing those aims, what's our motives and drivers, if we want to be leaders or facilitators, coaches, why on earth? So and in a way that's kind of basic stuff there. But of course then our, let's say, personalities in a way, what's our strengths we can build on, and what kind of developmental needs we are having, and of course our temper, our let's say emotional tendencies, and then I would talk about as well that it's kind of social self-awareness. So do I know how others perceive and experience me? So am I willing to get feedback? And I would say good self-awareness is something that we are pretty much aligned how others perceive and experience us, that we know that our own understanding about ourselves is pretty close to that. So because if we just think by ourselves, then we can start building our personal bubble in a way. And of course, it's kind of onion that we never get to know ourselves totally, because we can surprise ourselves. But of course, that's a basic thing. That whatever we do, I think this is something we should be interested in exploring. But then other part is self-regulation. So that how we manage our of course there can be a lot of other stuff here in these boxes. So there's just not this kind of comprehensive lists, and so that is just a disclaimer of this model. But then when we talk about self-regulation, it's pretty much of this kind of practical stuff, how we manage our activities, our resources, task time, energy, short-term, long-term, and then it's about are we able to adjust our emotional reactions, thoughts, behavior in a way that not. I think it's emotional reactions mostly, because emotions just come and go, but and that tells us something. But then what we do with those, and then of course it's pretty much following what kind of principles and values we follow, and how we keep up our boundaries. And then it's about being reflexive, being present. So it's about this listening experience exercise, for example, that it's part of self-regulation, that we can really focus our attention and focusing on listening to the other, not just responding or telling so reacting. And so that's one core thing here as well. But then I raise one interpersonal skill, what is learning, so it's kind of, we can think about our way of being in the world is kind of adapting in the context, and that way the learning is something what we do every day, but we maybe don't call that learning. But I would say that this kind of ability to learn from our experience, and it's also kind of developmental readiness and curiosity, that we accept that we can learn, we can become in a way better or more, well, let's say better. And then it's about that we are willing to get feedback. So it's about this, how others are seeing us, and we are also have this kind of enough critical stance towards ourselves. It can be that's this kind of or mercifulness, or that we also acknowledging that we are not knowing everything, that we have biases, and there's a lot of things we don't know, and that makes us more curious and willing to listen to others as well, and certain kind of acceptance maybe could be here. And then next layer is we can call social or interpersonal skills. And when we talk about self-awareness, then in social context, it's important that we are kind of aware of the context. What's the organization like? What's the dynamics there? So what happens between people in organized context? So it's kind of social and organizational dynamics, systems thinking as practice view, power and political dimensions, because all organizations are always also political or power contexts. So it's involved there in one form or another. And we should be aware of that in a way. And organizations are also emotional contexts. And when we talk about the change or transformation and facilitation, then there is quite a bit emotions involved. And then understanding certain kind of the culture and cultural processes, and of course the specific features of your own context. So because they are kind of anyway unique. And if we want to be a good facilitators, we understand we have a certain sense of understanding and even analytic skills of looking the organization. And then this more traditional stuff when we talk about leading or influencing. So that's how we enable and maintain mutual cause and purpose. Why are we doing this? So this is something that when we talk about the facilitation, for example, it's also that we maintain the process flow, and that's one part. It's pretty much close when we talk about leading as well. But then maintaining roles, structures, boundaries, enabling relations, and this kind of encountering emotions and people in an appreciative way. And it's also inclusive way of interacting. It's how we take into account all people involved, and then our way of communicating that is contributive. It's inviting more than restricting and closing. And of course, there is this kind of idea how we maintain the positivity and constructivity and dialogue, and understanding the relational dynamics, what happens between people. So that's and of course this is something that we can train and exercise all the time. And then I would like to, of course, coaching and transforming is something that is, or we can call here facilitating, that it's of course part of the influencing, but I'd like to emphasize it by taking it as a separate category of skills, that it's even more this kind of empowering and facilitating behavior and dialoguing, that we are willing to further the process and engage others and ask questions and help people to talk to each other and with each other. And it's pretty much taking this kind of helpful and emancipatory stance, that we are just what we talk about, that we should put our own ego a little bit aside, or we should take that when we are being able to be helpful, then we can be take our motivation is based on that, not just that we knew best. And of course it's pretty much this change agency then here in this basket. And then finally, around this is our substantial and contextual knowledge. It's good to know about that we certainly have some kind of technical or substantial expertise, and knowing the wider industry context, or even wider understanding the global dynamics in a way around. But we quite often take this here in the middle. They are somehow for us all already, but taking more deliberate stance and a willingness to document and train ourselves in this core parts. So that would be my kind of suggestion or proposal for you, and becoming more aware. And we are never ready in this, but it's generally whatever we do, I think it's beneficial to take seriously the core parts. And then meta routines, what are those? So there are routines, practice, habits that enable us to keep ourselves on track, improve our performance, develop our capabilities, learn continuously, and grow as a person. So it's something about self-management stuff, but it's also that what we do for learning. And for change agent, maybe, and there are some useful meta routines. So keeping up our curiosity, deliberate experimentation, experiencing. So it's pretty much putting us to different situations that we can learn from experience. And then this kind of reflexivity that we become more sensitize ourselves to different social situations and interactions. And then a reflection on experiences that we, whatever experiences we are having, and of course here concerning the facilitation, that we every time take a time to reflect on that we create a routine where we, after the situation, we go through how did it go, and what went well and so forth. And of course, using the feedback as well. And finally, how can we learn and improve? So it's I think this fundamental think about our lenses. So polishing our lenses so that we explicate our values, principles, and theory of facilitation of leadership, and write it in a paper. So and then start to fine tune it, and then this is pretty much experiencing. So getting experiences from different situations actively, and asking feedback, and reflecting experiences, and it's very beneficial if we can find a partner in reflection, mentor or something, or someone we can share our experiences, because it makes our meaning making much more enriched and richer. And then taking this, that it's not just a one sprint sometimes, but it's kind of continuous practice to improve. And so that's basically the Metaskills, routines, and how we can learn. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jari. Any comments from anybody? I'll switch to my slides if that's okay, Jari.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but sure, write down in the chat. But I think this, I'm sure you will. Well, some of you will get back to this, because I think this is a fantastic checklist to kind of go over and see that. But what was it, and what to keep an eye on, and what does it mean to have constant learning, and all of this that we have been so much bombarded in many contexts. And perhaps the thing before the last exercise is bringing kind of the bigger picture here, that actually we live in a world where learning is extremely critical. And I think we have been kind of overlooking learning, that learning is such a mundane thing that we can kind of think that it's just a simple thing. But now, in a world that is changing so rapidly, and we're all living through different changes, especially after the pandemic, it's kind of like learning has become our job now. And we should probably look into learning and kind of rethink it. And I'm convinced that if we think about the world we live in, there's a bigger change going on. And that's really about the transformation of work-life skills in general. And if you don't believe me, then perhaps you believe the World Economy Forum, that is, I think it's still running there in Davos. But, I mean, it's a topical thing now. But back in 2020, they already kind of had a new report which said about the reskilling, and kind of updated that actually, according to the World Economy Forum, 40% of all employees will require significant reskilling, upskilling. In another way, that's learning. And if it's that much of the workforce, that's a societal challenge. That's our societies require people at the workplace to learn new skills. And that's a huge thing. And learning requires probably facilitation, doesn't it? Because how much, if you think about, maybe some of you have kind of maybe thought that, okay, I'm actually a bit of a facilitator, or some of you are like, hey, this looks like a role I would like to have in my professional life. Then put it bluntly, yeah, there's work to be done. Because if you think about the digital transformation we have been going through in the past decade, how much actually it is a skills transformation. Or, how much the pandemic was actually a skills transformation, in the sense, of course, we had to learn the remote working, but also learn about, change leadership, change management, and all this. And this whole reskilling is very much about getting new experts work with the old experts. So again, you students there need to get working with the people who are already in the professional lives, and somebody needs to facilitate this process. And part of it is helping people to see the bigger picture, long-term impacts. And whether it's climate change or other dimension of sustainable world, That's a big picture thing. Somebody has to facilitate a lot of small, medium, large companies, any organizations, to see that, okay, what's your role in answering, for example, the climate change? Or we started with the full picture. I think there's huge demand for helping others work in uncertainty. And what Jari just went through very thoroughly is kind of just reminding that part of this requires new types of skills that are not specific to certain professions or certain education. So maybe those of you who already have your education and you are in the professional life, I'm pretty sure that you didn't have these meta skills in your degree. Or maybe if you identify as a certain kind of professional, how much actually kind of that profession requires you to have skills such as these, seeing the big picture, doing the eternal clarifying of objectives and goals, having those dialogues, listening to people, ability to bring those different people together, facilitating different kind of experts and people. And then last but not least, the ability to self-leadership. So to put it differently is that I guess this is the thesis from us, the teachers of this course, to try to convince you that the uncertain landscape we live in many ways, and the transformations, like the reskilling transformation we are all facing in the next years, bring forth, they kind of surface that we need actually these skills. We need skills to see the big picture. We need skills to iterate, clarify objectives, ability to bring people different together. And there's this new skill of how do we make sure that we and others remain sane during this process. And maybe now it makes sense to show you that we're kind of hoping that some of these very simple exercises might be pushing you and showing you and maybe giving you the skills, seeing the big picture, exercise 1 and 2. Iterating the goals, having dialogues, meaning making, exercises 3 and 4, and then bringing different skills together, facilitating different experts. I think exercises 3, 4, and 5 were really about those in a way. What we didn't have was the last one, the ability for self-leadership and well-being. Which brings me actually to my kind of last mini lecture, or the points, is that all of this we discussed a little bit in the beginning, that what's the world if you go out there and start facilitating towards some kind of an organization, because remember, this was much about organizational transformation. What kind of an organization are you actually creating in your facilitation work, in making those little and small and big things? What's your vision of what kind of organization do you want? And often, in the past decade even, we have a lot of hype and a lot of talk about having flat organizations, and we don't need bosses anymore. And we want organizations where people can be your best. You could be whatever you want. You could be passionate. Just go into LinkedIn and put passionate in it and see how many people literally say that they're passionate about this and this and this. And I think there's a little bit of let's be careful here when it comes to people's well-being, because the list over there that I put, I think you could look at it that could be a total recipe for a burnout hell where narcissistic people thrive. And what I mean by this is that this is actually based on a master's thesis we did many years ago, and trying to understand that much of the idealism and much of the hype, much of the things about we dream about, organizations have problems. One of them is that if you take away hierarchies, there's going to be invisible hierarchies. When you put people together, there's going to be hierarchies. If you don't make them explicit, they're implicit. Because then, it begs the question, who has the soft power, the power that you cannot see? Who can influence others? Who is bold enough to use the autonomy that actually you're wishing for? And even if we have the lovely dreamlike organization where everybody can be free, there's going to be social pressure. That's how we human beings work. if we're saying that, hey, anybody can be anything in this workplace, then there's becomes this almost invisible negotiation of what is normal. And if nobody's telling you this is normal, that it's kind of left open, what people typically do, that they just, the social pressure just puts the normality in too high. And if nobody is telling you what are your goals, nobody's telling you that this is successful goal for our project, then where are the conversations that you know what is enough, what is a success? And if nobody's giving kind of rules or even governance in an organization, how do you know how to behave, how to work? And then social pressure starts working, and then that process can be good, but then can be bad as well. And then you can look in the mirror as well and think about yourself. What are your own beliefs? What kind of mental prisons you might have? Like I said, I actually very much dislike the whole thing about being passionate about something. I don't think passion is a word we should use in a work context. Passion is something you use in a romantic context or in your free time, in your hobbies. But kind of depends what you mean. And then am I passionate enough? Are they going to hire me if I'm not passionate enough about ERP systems? I think there should be warning bells going on. What is your own definition of success? If sky's the limit, who's going to tell you that that's enough? You don't have to do work anymore. And of course, what's your own philosophy about working and non-working? When do you draw the lines? And like those two questions underneath, are you capable of managing your own stress? And who makes you stop when there's too much work? So in a way, to say that we need rules. But this is what I'm saying. We need regulation. We need boundaries. I would even be bold enough to say that we need bureaucracy. Because left on our own devices, we're not good. We're going to burn out. At worst, we're going to create organizations where people burn out and narcissists thrive. And I put here this Otis book. I think I might have it here actually somewhere. It's fantastic because this Otis book, I'm really sorry that it's only finished at the moment. But Otis really gives an example of a different kind of organization culture, something that is actually communal when it's done together, a social context. Let me see where we are at. So maybe a couple of things that as a reminder about thinking about. So what kind of a world am I actually building? Because like it goes back to the World Economy Forum's report, practically all organizations need a transformation, and all of them need some kind of facilitation. So the facilitators probably need to think that what kind of a world are we? What kind of an organization I'm building? And we should look deeper than just the basic fashionable items about, freedom and flat organizations. So things that you probably need rules and boundaries is having shared meanings on what is work, what is success, what is autonomy for us in these organizations. Where are the boundaries? What am I responsible for? Where do my responsibilities stop? And that's enough. And then that helps me to self-manage, that helps me to self-leadership. And having roles and responsibilities and the power associated with them visible. So we know that person has actually legal power over that person. That person has actually maybe responsibilities over this person. And we have hierarchies, and hierarchies can be really good. We have rules, we have regulations, and that helps us to self-manage and become autonomous. And last but not least, I think everybody would agree that we live very much in an individualistic societies where a lot of responsibility is given to the individual. And in some places it just goes further and further. What I call here is hyper individualism. It's like, in addition, all of these million things you are responsible, now you're also responsible for your own well-being. And that's I think that's a wrong approach into all of this. Okay, ERP passion. Thank you, John. Let's see what else is there. Marriott has all this book, fantastic. Cryptocurrency, no rules, no boundaries, no bureaucracy. 2 trillion USD lost and now worthless. Thank you, Simon. And you can add it to that list is all the energy burned by cryptocurrencies that maybe should have been put elsewhere or not used at all. Really saying experience of sociocracy, really as a method of trying to tackle those challenges. Worked fine for some parts, but not any silver bullet for everything either. And Joel says, on the other hand, I like to think that it's often possible to find something that you are genuinely passionate about and get paid for. So it's not impossible or categorically negative thing if you're actually passionate about your work. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Joel. Thanks for bringing it up. But I rephrase it again. I said that alarm bells should be ringing if you're asking people to be passionate about work. It's okay to be passionate about work, but if you're asking people, if that becomes kind of a criteria for a professional, that you need to, be even passionate about it, it maybe goes into territory that might be morally problematic. Okay, anything else? Jari, anything you want to add?
I think that passion is important, but I really truly agree with you that it can't be a requirement, and sometimes it can be a trap. When we create an organization where we are all very passionate, then we start to be a little biased and blinded, and we start to own our tasks so deeply that we just defend and it turn kind of negative thing. But being passionate is very, very good, but then being critical about our passionism is something we should keep in mind or with us.
Yeah. For those of you who understand Finnish, I like the word Finnish intohimo, because then you can start saying that I'm really intohimokas about my work, and you already start listening. What are you saying? Because there's the word lust in it, himo in Finnish, and that already I think puts a little bit alarm bells on. So maybe how do you put work and lust together? No, they're probably different. They should be different spheres. Balanced passion. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Thank you, Simon. Yeah. But like I said, it's like, hopefully your alarm bells go off and think about it. What are you asking people to do? Because I think it's perfectly fine to have a professional at the workplace saying that, my passion is actually watching basketball games. I'm here to work and I'm here to do a really good job because I'm a professional. But at the end of the day, this is work. Maybe it's the middle-aged man in me who thinks about that. Let's have a final breakout room, about 10 minutes. And this is really all about, I'm taking it slow now so you can actually think about the exercise before we throw you together. Is maybe at least 1-2 concrete things that you will be doing next. Can be abstract things, concrete or abstract thing or anything between. But kind of think that something that, okay, this is what I took from this course, and this is how I'm going to change my identity or way of working. I share them with each other. Have a discussion. Let's give 10 minutes to that. Okay? And into breakout rooms on my behalf. Thank you. And that's it. Everybody is back. Welcome back. Hugely appreciated if you write down on the chat your next steps or any other thing, commenting on anything. Thank you, Simon. And Subi is already going with the session too. There we go. Let's have a look. Part of the exercise is, of course, to make you kind of promise other people that you're going to do this. So actually, now that the course ends, you're kind of having this little social pressure of you to be accountable of what you said. And then we're kind of hoping that this helps you to actually change things and take things into use. Yeah, like Ines, you say over or right over there, just in simplicity, finding a personal sparring partner to share thoughts and open up your thinking. As simple as that. It's just such a simple thing, and it will make us all so much better professionals if we remember that. Implementing useful tools, practical approach to work-life balance, theory-based approach. Rehearse skills in one-to-one meetings. Giving space for people to speak aloud and listen actively. I think that's a nice one. Try to see big picture instead of paying attention to details. Excellent. Ideally have both. Additionally, communicating should be improved. Don't assume others know what they know. Yeah, that's a good skill for life. Not to assume too much that people know what you're talking about. It's kind of funny with this course and being a teacher here already, because we have Jari and me have been running this course for 3 times. We make them, at least I do. Jari probably does less. But I do the mistake that I kind of assume that that you understand what this exercise we're asking from you, but just have to remind, no, these are totally new people. They are not here for the 3rd time. So it's just a reminder that we just so easily assume that people know what we're talking about or how we're communicating. Yeah. Hey, super thanks for those. And I hope that when you shared these in the breakout rooms, you also got this kind of valuable thing that, okay, that person took that thing out of this. Interesting, all that. But let's, start wrapping things up. That's it. That's lecture 6 out of 6. Next week, tasks. Hey, look what you just wrote down. But don't leave yet. A couple of things to mention. First of all, further readings. The first one is award-winning master's thesis on work recovery and has about self-managing organizations. There's the Aaron Dignan book. Maybe some of you have read it. Brave New Work. There's Otis' book I mentioned already. Then this one is really a colleague of ours, or colleagues of ours are running this online course on future of work. And I think that's kind of related to this, like in my statement was. And there are a couple of free tools, actually. The first time we did this online 2 years ago when the pandemic hit, we went knocking on the virtual doors of these companies and asking them that, hey, do you have free tools that you would like to share with these people taking part in the facilitation course? And you can still find all of them, so the URL is there up above. And they are just different tools for doing things in addition to what tools you have. So maybe you want to check them out, what kind of stuff there is. And then one more important thing, please check your emails in the coming week, especially if you have undone business. If you have, if you have missed a deadline or if you have missed a lecture, then Kiara and Lee will be in touch with you. And note that this course really stops working on June 10th. So if you're trying to contact any of us after June 10th, it's not going to be easy, because I think I will be back late August. So please make sure that you get your things done, because if you don't do them by June 10th, then you're not going to pass the course. And then many of you FITEC people are asking for the course certificate, which is perfectly fine, but we don't provide them. They come from FITEC. They probably come from the FITEC system somehow, which unfortunately we're not that familiar with. So make sure that if you have things, that check your emails and make sure that you have everything done, preferably as soon as possible. Attendance form has been put there a couple of times. Make sure that these go to Medium as usual, and we are still for a little bit like 2 weeks still of answering that email and the Slack channel and all that.